Most people believe they make their own choices, but rarely ask who or what is doing the choosing. That thought haunted me. It clung to the edges of my everyday decisions. What I ate, who I trusted, even the way I reacted to a smile or a scowl. There was a pattern to it all, a rhythm, not one I wrote. We assume that to be human is to be in control. But what if the mind is less a captain and more a haunted ship? We think of memory as a record of the past, but memory is shaped as much by emotion as by fact. Your recollections, they're not archives, they're stories written by your fears, your wounds, your needs, and most of all, by the parts of you that you can't see. This is where we begin. In this documentary episode, titled The Illusion of Control, a psychological exploration of the hidden self, we examine the unseen systems that guide our behavior, the architecture of the unconscious mind, its silent influence on our beliefs, our relationships, our very sense of identity. If you've ever wondered why you do what you do, why your habits feel unbreakable, or why some parts of yourself feel foreign or frightening, then this is not just a story, it's a confrontation. Our journey won't take us across continents, but through the corridors of belief, trauma, habit, and buried memory. We'll explore shadow work psychology, the quiet battle between your conscious self and the forces pulling the strings behind it. If the search for self-awareness and transformation speaks to you, subscribe, turn on the bell. These are the kinds of questions that don't leave us unchanged, because this isn't a story about monsters. It's about what we do when we discover we are the thing in the dark. We often speak of the mind as if it were a single voice. But that voice is an illusion, a mask worn by hundreds of silent systems, each competing for dominance. What we call I is not a sovereign being, but a parliament of instincts, defenses, memories, and desires. And most of them, we never invited. And let's begin with the basement of the mind. The unconscious, not the cinematic version with spinning spirals and ink blot tests. I'm talking about the real thing, the hidden self. It's made of three essential layers: primal instincts, the animal beneath the skin emotional memory, the residue of what hurt or healed psychological defenses, the masks we wear to stay functional. Each of these layers operates beneath awareness, and each has one mission: to keep you safe at any cost. Take fear, for example. You feel it rise in your chest before your rational mind catches up. Why? Because fear isn't an emotion, it's an algorithm, a fast-acting survival script written over millions of years. And even if it's no longer tigers in the bushes, your unconscious still reacts as if it's life or death. It's efficient, it's invisible, and it overrides logic more often than you'd care to admit. Then there's emotional memory. You think you remember what happened, but in truth, you remember how it made you feel. The unconscious prioritizes emotion over accuracy. You don't avoid fire because it's red. You avoid it because it burned. And sometimes we carry those burns into rooms that never had a fire in them. This is how trauma travels. The third layer, psychological defenses, are perhaps the most deceptive. Denial, projection, rationalization. They're not flaws, they're architecture, defense mechanisms that shape your very identity. Your job, your relationships, even your morality may be built on what you needed to believe to survive something you didn't understand. And here's the chilling part. Most of your life has been designed by these unseen hands. When you lash out in traffic, freeze during intimacy, sabotage a good opportunity, or lie without knowing why, that's not a personality flaw. That's your unconscious at work. Because the unconscious isn't evil. It's not even wrong, it's just ancient. It remembers what your conscious mind forgot. It protects, it controls, and in doing so, it may be writing the script of your entire life. If this resonates with you so far, leave a mark. Let your presence be known. comment, like, subscribe. These aren't just passive reflections, they're psychological fingerprints. We like to believe we are consistent, that the face we wear is real, that our choices, our beliefs, our reactions are ours. But there are moments when the illusion fractures, moments when we witness ourselves from the outside, doing something we swore we'd never do, saying something that feels like someone else. And in those moments, the mirror of the self begins to crack. Let's talk about addiction. To outsiders, addiction seems like a choice. Why not just stop? But the unconscious mind doesn't care about logic, it cares about pattern. It recognizes pain, and it remembers what soothed it even once: a cigarette, a scroll, a bottle, a person. Each becomes a key to the lock of internal discomfort, even if it never truly fits, even if the door leads nowhere. Or consider emotional flashbacks when your reaction doesn't match the moment. A raised voice, a certain smell, a room that feels just wrong. You think you're overreacting, but really, your unconscious is reliving something, not as a memory, but as a threat. This is where shadow work psychology becomes vital. Because you cannot fix what you do not know exists. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Let that sink in. Every fight you pick, every relationship you chase or flee from, every belief you defend with ferocity, might not be about the present moment at all. It might be about what haunts your mirror. We live in a society obsessed with control, routines, goals, self-optimization. But what if control itself is a myth? What if the steering wheel isn't even connected to the wheels? That unsettling possibility isn't meant to rob you of hope. It's meant to guide you toward truth. Because the moment the mirror cracks, you begin to see what's really looking back. She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper, as if addressing something or someone just beyond perception. If my voice has reached you, leave a trace, a sign, before the silence becomes permanent. This is your moment, curious mind. Engage, like, share, comment, subscribe, and perhaps you'll make it through what lingers just beyond awareness. There's a part of you that never speaks. It watches, waits, and when you're vulnerable, when your guard is down, it takes the wheel. This part has a name: the shadow. In depth psychology, the shadow is everything we refuse to see in ourselves. The jealousy we deny, the rage we suppress, the guilt, the shame, the primitive instincts we bury beneath politeness and performance. We lock them away, not because they're evil, but because they're inconvenient. They clash with the image we show the world. They violate the story we've told ourselves about who we are. But the shadow doesn't die just because we pretend it doesn't exist. It adapts. It becomes sarcasm instead of confrontation, control instead of vulnerability, withdrawal instead of asking for help. It lives in your patterns, in your self-sabotage, in your reactions you can't explain. Ever judged someone harshly for something only to realize you were projecting? Ever found yourself attracted to danger even while running from it? That's not contradiction. That's your shadow trying to make itself known. It doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be integrated. But integration is not the same as indulgence. You don't become the shadow. You learn to walk beside it without letting it walk. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." And that's the paradox of shadow work. To truly know who you are, you must first admit who you are not, then look closer at what remains. Facing the shadow means looking in the mirror without flinching. It means asking, why does this trigger me? What am I afraid people might see? Who am I when no one's watching? And it means understanding that even your darkness is a part of your wholeness. But this is not a journey for the faint of heart, because when you first meet your shadow, it might not speak in words. It might scream, it might seduce. It might beg you to forget it exists, and still you must stay, not to tame it, but to listen. This is shadow work psychology, not as a self-help trend, but as a spiritual confrontation. It is a turning toward discomfort so that we may stop running from ourselves. Integration is not about purity, it's about wholeness. We were never meant to be perfect, only complete. And that includes the parts we've disowned. The moment we recognize the shadow not as an enemy, but as a messenger, everything begins to shift. You start to notice the space between action and reaction. You no longer lash out without reflection. You begin to respond instead of being ruled by reflex. This is emotional intelligence, not as a buzzword, but as a survival skill. The ability to name what you feel, to trace it back to its root, and to decide consciously what to do with it. This is how transformation begins. The real work of self-awareness and transformation doesn't happen in moments of triumph. It happens when we stay present in the midst of discomfort, when we choose not to escape, when we hold our ground when the past replays, when we stop asking, "How do I get rid of this feeling?" and instead ask, "What is it trying to tell me?" The unconscious doesn't vanish when acknowledged. It joins you. It becomes a partner in perception, not a puppet master behind the curtain. You become aware of how fear disguised itself as control, how people-pleasing masked a fear of rejection, how rage guarded your most vulnerable wound, and for the first time, you're not being lived by your programming, you're living with awareness. Let's go back to the beginning. Most people believe they make their own choices, but the truth is, they don't. Not until they've confronted what was choosing for them. The moment you meet that force, you have a choice not to erase it, but to integrate it, to become not a better self, but a truer one. And so, as we approach the end of this journey, consider this. Your story isn't written in ink, it's written in awareness. And the moment you look at the author, really look, you reclaim the pen. But the mind doesn't forget what it's seen, not the flicker of unconscious memory, not the silent motives that guided your days, not the shadow you met and walked beside. If tonight's unraveling left a trace, follow it. Because this journey was never just about understanding psychology, it was about remembering something buried, that you were never broken, only divided. And the work of healing is the art of becoming whole again. In this mirror, some saw a stranger, some saw a wound, some saw home. And if you're one of the ones still searching for clarity, for understanding, for self-command, there are more stories, more truths, more questions waiting in our depth psychology playlist linked below. But remember, the most unsettling revelations aren't the ones we hear, they're the ones we recognize in ourselves. This is the illusion of control, and this is the beginning of your awareness. If this left a mark on you, share it, comment, subscribe, not for numbers, not for algorithms, but as a signal that someone else might see the sign and start their own descent into the self. Because in the dark corridors of the unconscious, even the faintest light can change everything. See you in the next video.